What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy. That's Joe. This is the Race Day Rundown, and boy, do we have a ton to talk about. We were at COTA last week. We saw one heck of a race, one heck of a finish. Really, all the races were really good. But before we get into that, before we get into Richmond, just a couple quick little things here. If you're going to be playing on DraftKings and you're not already part of our DK contest, drop your DraftKings tag down below. We'll add you, and we're just going to have some fun with it. We did set up an F1. There's no F1 this week, but if you drop that tag below, we'll add you to both when we have it. The other thing, we will be giving our full list of DK Impact scores in our race guide, which is in our Patreon, link down below. But, man, we got so much to get into. I don't want to waste too much time. Joe, set these guys up for Richmond because there's a lot of laps here, so there's a lot of points up for stakes.
There was a lot that happened. I'm excited for getting into the conversation because Richmond is where we're going this week. Short track action, 3/4 of a mile. I'm really excited to see this composite body and who takes advantage of it. We saw Ross Chastain last week really get into some bump and run activities. Talked about that a lot after the race there. But there's a lot of performance points at these short tracks. That's going to be one of those things where we're going to talk about because strategy is going to be key here. Whenever there's a lot of performance points, you're looking at these guys trying to find the right dominator. Is Gibbs going to be that? We got to find out how that's going to play into this because this is a 300-mile race. It's not very long, 400 laps, though. That's what we've got to kind of unpack here because whenever you're doing these stage races, man, there's going to be some points up for grabs at the stages, ends of stages as well. So people will have some strategy. Teams will have some strategy for that as well. So there's a lot going on at Richmond this week too. Martin Truex Jr., he was the winner here last year. I know there's a lot to talk about on the Team Gibbs. Do you want to kind of start there?
Well, definitely. Let's start with Gibbs. We're going to highlight Toyota this week. We're going to try something a little bit new. Just freshen up the show just a little bit. And the reason why we picked Gibbs this week is because they've been so good here over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. It seems like they've just completely owned this track, but they have struggled in this new car. Now, you got guys like Kyle Busch and Martin Truex. They both have 3 top 10s so far this year, so they're at 50% there. But then you got guys like Hamlin, 0 top 10s. So we need to try to really see if we can figure out, because I think Toyota is, you either go in on Toyota this week and you stack them or you fade them. That's kind of what I'm thinking based on season momentum, season performance, and then what we've already seen with practice and qualifying. They've looked much better in qualifying, but where do you see this Toyota program, specifically Joe Gibbs? I'm going to talk about 2311 too, because obviously they're the next big Toyota team. Where do you want to take this Joe Gibbs Racing stable here? Because you got Hamlin, who's just, dude, he's the worst Toyota driver, I think, in the field this year so far. And obviously we know that's not going to last forever. We know that he does have good talent. Completely underperforming. Kyle Busch has been probably the best. You want to work our way up or start to work our way down?
I think we have to start with Hamlin. I really think that's where the conversation has to begin because he's not only a driver for Toyota, he's an owner for Toyota. So he is really the baseline, I think, that has to be judged here. And I was really looking for him to come out strong and really take advantage of in the season early with this new car and kind of get things figured out. But it's just kind of been lacking. There hasn't been a performance that you can look to and say Denny Hamlin looked strong.
Yeah, he had some times at COTA where he was running up front. Some of it's just different pit strategy. Which I forget which race it was. Phoenix, I think he was doing okay there before he just made an error in his shifting pattern and destroyed that transaxle, which we've talked about before. So again, you can't put all those race results just on that one error because he's not going to do that on a consistent basis. But that certainly has just been sort of his trend so far this year. He's either getting caught up in other people's wrecks, just having I think the more important thing is to really note is it just seems like the performance isn't quite there. Really, aside from Kyle Busch and his brother Kurt Busch, there really hasn't really seemed like a really strong Toyota driver. I mean, Martin Truex has had some good finishes, but it's like you barely even know he's racing. Now, some of that is just how Fox covers the broadcast and things like that. But I haven't seen anything that made me go, Martin Truex is a strong contender this year. Like right now, we know who some of these fast guys are. We know Briscoe. We know Reddick. Obviously, Chastain. Like these guys have been pretty consistent over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. We're not seeing that out of hardly anybody in this Joe Gibbs stable. If there's a place for Hamlin, who we're talking about here, to get a good bounce back, you would think it'd be at his home track.
Yeah,
we're in Virginia.
Yeah, and you hit home right there, and I think driving home the stats that we've kind of you're talking about, you summarize it well in this week's Garage Thoughts, and you look at really what's up with Denny Hamlin, and it's the average place differential. I think that's the glaring point here. He's got the worst in the Cup Series with 12.8. Minus 12.8 is his average place differential. And so you look at it, he's got a pretty decent car, but if your average finish is 24th, he's still only top 12, and that's not typical Denny Hamlin.
And 15.6 is his average running position.
Yeah, so that's typically not what you're used to from the lead car in Team Gibbs. He's typically what you measured Joe Gibbs racing by, and it hasn't been there. So it's very difficult to understand how this whole ship is righted. Is it going to happen? This is the Toyota Owners 400. This is a title race for Team Toyota, and Gibbs has always been a strong performer here at this track, with Kyle Busch and Martin Truex really being dominators and having a lot of wins here. 6 wins, I believe it is, for Kyle Busch. He is one of the top performers here, and one, like you said, one of the strongest performers from Joe Gibbs Racing this year, and I think he's one of those guys that we talked about in one of the podcasts leading up to the season, where we thought we'd see a couple guys take advantage of this composite body, really put their nose out there and see what they're able to get away with. With Joe Gibbs, Kyle Busch has kind of been that guy, and we really anticipated that happening. And I think he's going to be one this week that we might want to look at a little bit closer as well.
Yeah, his numbers have dropped the last couple of races, but I don't want to emphasize too much last week. I don't remember exactly where he was running on that last lap at Coda before getting spin out. Do you remember who that was? Was that Chase? No, it wasn't Chase.
He didn't get spun out by anybody. He went around on his own.
Was it?
Yeah,
I thought there was someone close enough
to
him.
There was a definitive angle that came out that he just got around on his own, unfortunately.
Okay.
And he lost it, and that just lost a lot of people a lot of money, because he was one of the favorites. He had a fast car, and he was up there competing, but just didn't end well. And I was there with the young Kyle Busch fan asking where he was whenever he crossed the finish line. So
yeah. not good there. But again, I mean, that's going to hurt the numbers a little bit. But, yeah, he's got 3 top 10s out of the 6 races so far. But when you start to factor in some of these races, 15.3 average finish, some of that skewed a little bit from last week. But, man, not too great there. Got about the same driver rating as Denny Hamlin, but talk about 2 sort of different ends of the spectrum. Another thing that I will point out is we talked about this a few weeks ago. I believe it was the Atlanta show where we introduced our points per lap, and that's taking in fastest laps led, and then your finishing position. So the points that they're actually gaining you, we're not factoring in place differential, even though that obviously is a huge aspect to DraftKings scoring. But when you just factor just those other 3 minus the PD, Kyle Busch still ranks 5th out of all these drivers. So he still has had some good performance this year. So this does make me, really like his odds if Toyota's going to hit this week. Same kind of reasons for Martin Truex. He's also ranked inside the top 10 in that same scoring metric there, or stat metric. But, man, aside from those 2, I'm having a hard time wanting to put any faith in guys like Hamlin and Christopher Bell. and just Joe Gibbs overall, I mean, I'm legit kind of concerned with where they're at. Do you see this as being the week that they finally get it to click, or do you think they're still a little bit behind? Because watching in practice, I feel like right now Fords going into Richmond look the best. Chevys are right there, and then it's Toyotas, in my opinion, just kind of overall with what I'm seeing. Did you see anything different from your point of view?
I think it's going to be fun to watch how Toyota comes out and performs, because you're right. I think Ford kind of has a little bit of a upper hand based on practice and qualifying. Joey Logano just missed being in the top 5 for his round, which put him in 11th. I think he's a strong value this week. His teammate Ryan Blaney got the pole. He looks fast throughout the season in different points. So I think they've got a tough matchup against Ford. It's going to be fun to see what Chevy brings. William Byron looked really fast in qualifying. His teammates Larson and Elliott not so much, but they have a lot of upside and value this week in the DraftKings slate. So I think there's a lot to really unpack and get into when we're looking at where the value lies this week.
Okay. So before we move off of Joe Gibbs and get into a little bit of 2311 where they're stacked up, kind of talked about Truex a little bit. I briefly mentioned Christopher Bell. Where are you thinking with Christopher Bell? Because he starts inside the top 10. I believe he finished 3rd last week. Didn't look, in my opinion, that dominant, but he put himself in position late in the race to get that good finish. But it was only his 2nd top 10 of the year so far. And in that metric that I just mentioned, the points per lap, he does rank 24th, so he's not getting you a ton of performance points. But we know that Richmond is somewhat similar to New Hampshire, where he's really good at these shorter tracks, a little bit flatter. Obviously, Richmond's not super flat like New Hampshire is. But do you think this might be a little sneaky spot to throw if you're on Toyota this week? Because like I said, I still think the move is either you go multiple Toyota drivers, you say they hit as an organization, or you kind of fade them, or at most you only have one. Is Bell in kind of that contention? I know we'll go over our impact scores here in a little bit, but just kind of looking at these 4, you have any interest there in Christopher Bell?
I do, because I think this week place differential is going to be tough because it is a shorter track, and what's going to be key is track position. And I think he being in the top 10 already with his price tag and kind of maybe flying under the radar a bit with the top 3 last week at the road course, it's hard to do that. He was running around that track kind of by himself for a lot of it, just trying to stay on the lead lap, and he did that and got in position late to get a 3rd place finish. I liked him a lot. I think he's somebody that you can feel a little bit more comfortable with. Maybe he's got a little bit momentum behind him in that team. But 8,700 starting 9th with that track position, I think it's going to be something that you can lean on a little bit in tournaments.
All right, I want to talk about 2311, and then I want to start going through the impact scores, and then we'll start talking about some other drivers. Before I shift gears, was there anything else about these 4 Joe Gibbs drivers that you maybe wanted to say or point out that maybe we just hadn't discussed before we move on?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. I think really the thing that I'm looking forward to most is where Denny Hamlin comes out of this week. He cannot have another bad week, or it's just going to be very difficult for him to get in on points. So I can't believe we're talking about that, but with as many guys that have wins, as many of these youngsters that are on the edge of winning, you better start points racing, and then we'll see how they approach it this week.
I know the NASCAR schedule is a little different this year compared to last year as far as which tracks we went to. And I don't remember the exact stat line, but I believe, wasn't it through the first 5 or 6 races last year, Denny Hamlin had top 5s in all of them. I mean, talk about, obviously it's a new car, we get all that, but just talk about 2 completely different years. I mean, he dominated the last 2 years of that Gen 6 car. I mean, was 2nd most winningest driver in 2020, won or barely lost the regular season championship to Larson, and Larson I think at that point had 7 or 8 wins, and Hamlin had none. I mean, he was just Mr. Consistent, Mr. Give me a top 5 or I'll settle for a top 10. and now we're legit having to worry about can he point his way in if he's unable to win, because he didn't get his first win last year until the playoffs. So if he has something similar, I mean, as early as it is, isn't it crazy we're potentially talking about Denny Hamlin missing the playoffs after 6 races?
Wild.
I think another driver that is going to have a pretty hard time making it in on points the way that he's currently running is the driver for Denny Hamlin. And specifically, I'm talking about Bubba Wallace. He's had times, obviously finished second, almost got that win at the Daytona 500, was looking really racy again at a drafting track, Atlanta. But you got to take those races away, man. He's got that one top 5 finishing second. Average finish is 19.8. Driver rating is 67.4, which is pretty far. It's pretty bad compared to even his new teammate, Kurt Busch. We'll talk about him in a second. Where are you at with Bubba Wallace this year? Because I thought that he was going to finally take another step. Having Kurt Busch there early in this season, I thought would really help him. Because they finished the season out last year much better than how they started it. But it has been rough over there, in my opinion. You see anything differently?
It has been rough, and I think it's going to be something that they'll continue to get better. I think we talked about it at the beginning of the season and in some of our early episodes that Kurt Busch would be the measuring stick that we measured this team by, and we've seen how competitive Bubba has been in the super speedway setups. We saw him really have some strong finishes and get a second place finish early. That was really something I hope to see them build off of, and it's just not come in all the other races, unfortunately. So I think this week you might find some value with him and be somebody that you could look to in tournaments. It's going to be hard for me to want to do that with some other guys around him that have some more consistency.
I mean, he's below 6K, and he's starting, 27th, 29th? I mean, that should be lock city. That just shows you how much that team is struggling right now, where it's like you see someone of that car's capability, that team's capability, and we're like, I don't know if I want to risk this low-end play. I think I might want to go to some other plays. That's not a good position to be in if you're that number 23 team. Still plenty of time to turn it around. We still have 2 more super speedways that he has a chance to get a win at. So not complete dumpster fire over there, but I'm sure they are a little nervous. But I think if you look at his teammate, Kurt Busch, in that 45, 3 top 10s already. Been a little sneaky. Points per lap rank is 16th, which is better than Wallace. It is better than Denny Hamlin, and it is better than Christopher Bell. But still, he's not getting you a ton of points in those categories, and most of those are coming from finishing positions. I wouldn't say Kurt Busch is necessarily having a Kurt Busch type year like he was having towards the end of that Chip Ganassi stint that he had. But I think he's actually met or even exceeded my expectations of that 45 team. I thought that they might kind of struggle a little bit, second car, get the team right. But, man, he's shown Kurt Busch is a wheelman, and he's still really good. Even as long as he's been racing, he doesn't seem like he's hardly lost anything.
Well, and it's the model of consistency. He's completed 99% of the laps, only missed 2 laps this entire season. That was something that was glaring in the data that you put together in the Garage Thoughts that I was like, all right, well, you can also see that he's 50% of the races this year in the top 10. So he is somebody that you can measure the team by, but Bubba's just lacking a little bit in some of the other metrics that are outside of the super speedways. So if they can get the whole package together, I think this team has a really nice path for some value, because these guys are not always priced at the top of the slate every week. So there's always a way for them to reach value, because they don't qualify high typically, and then we see Kurt Busch have some strong performances and he knows how to win. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the season plays out from here.
All right, so let's start shifting to our impact scores, but let's stick with Toyota. Let's do the rundown of the Toyota drivers since we've already talked about them. Then we'll kind of go back through and fill the gap. We'll just kind of go down the salary board. So the most expensive Toyota driver this week is Kyle Busch. He's 9,900. He starts third. He did look pretty fast in practice and was able to put down a pretty fast qualifying lap. Obviously, we already talked about just how good he is here. If Toyota hits, I really like this Kyle Busch play. I'm at a 9.5 on Kyle Busch, just because if he does get out front like he did at Vegas and was able to get those laps led and things like that, 9,900 is not that expensive. Even if he were to drift back and finish 5th or 6th, but if he gets a good amount of laps led, he might end up still being in the optimal. So with Kyle Busch, I'm at a 9.5.
I'm at a 9.5 as well. I think him and the guy we'll talk about probably next, his teammate Truex Jr., are two of the best drivers to try to build your lineups around based on a dominator. Because out of the last 7 races and the data that we have here for Richmond that we put together, and then that all of our information in our race guide is built around, man, these two guys have won 5 of those 7 races, and Kyle Busch has 6 wins here, like we talked about earlier, just here alone. So
I think he also has, like, I saw the stat in practice. I think it was top 5s. It might have been top 10s, but I want to say they said he had 18 top 5 finishes here in his career. Even if it's top 10, regardless, that's still an amazing stat.
Even in the race data that you put together in those 7 races, 100% of the time he's finishing in the top 10. So this guy knows how to get the job done here. I'd look for him this week to be a really good metric to see how they can drive this home for Team Gibbs. I think the next guy you look at is Martin Truex Jr. He's right there with them on the salary board even. 9,600 starting 6th. He's got even more upside. We don't have a lot of place differential to look at this week because it is a short track. Guess what? You want track position. So guys that are starting up there, it's going to be harder to pass in the back. You want clean air. These cars have shown that clean air is king. So if you can get up there, lead some laps, and really do some racing, I think Martin Truex Jr. obviously knows how to get that done.
Yeah, he sure does. I'm at a 9.5 on him. Same with Kyle Busch. I think, obviously, I've already kind of told you sort of my strategy with playing these guys, stack them up. But if these guys don't hit and none of the other Toyota guys hit, I think you're going to see some panic out of that whole Toyota group, because this is the track that they need to perform well. If they can perform well here, it's a track that's similar enough to other tracks that I think that they can kind of build off of and get some good data. But yeah, if they struggle here and just get their butts whooped by Ford and Chevy again, it could be a pretty long season before we start seeing them really catch up. So I'm still going to be playing some of these guys, but I'm definitely going to be a little cautious on them. Their teammate, Denny Hamlin, I talked about him a lot already, 9,300. He starts 13th, so there is some place differential upside. And we know starting inside the top 15, you still have a good shot to get out front and lead laps, and may not even have to do it on pit strategy. You just could have a fast enough car to do it. I'm a little bit more reserved on Hamlin. I need to see him actually finish a solid race in this car before I give him the green light again. I'm at an 8. I'm going to be just a little bit more reserved.
I'm at a 9 because I think we have to look at what this is. This is the Toyota Owners 400. I think Toyota's going to come here with a little bit more oomph than we've seen so far this season, and I think it has to be from Denny Hamlin. I think he is the guy we're looking at this week to really step up that. If Kyle Busch obviously is going to lead laps, I think, and we'll see Truex, but I think the sleeper could be and has place differential that the other guys don't. Denny Hamlin has upside there, so I do want to have him.
Some strong cars starting in front of him, though. If they hit, it's going to be hard to pass them. But let's talk about the last Joe Gibbs driver here, Christopher Bell. He is starting inside the top 10. He starts 9th. He's 8,700. I think he has potential to just surprise everyone and just kind of get out there in front, but I'm going to be more reserved on him as well. I'm going to be at a 7, just because kind of the same reasons why I gave for Hamlin. It's just I'm not going to factor in his finish from last week. It was a road course. I I just can't factor that in too much. I need to see if he can really run well here, even if he has a bad finish. But if he runs well here, then that's where it's like, okay, you can give him a little bit more of a pass. Oh, they got in the wall a little bit. Oh, so-and-so bumped him out of the way a little bit, really hurt his average or hurt his finish. You can start to pick it apart like that. But right now, I'm just not seeing it out of that 20 team to say, yeah, we can go up and dominate races.
Well, I think starting in the top 10 is shows some speed that we're looking for. So I've given them an 8. I think track position, like I've talked about throughout this episode, is going to be king. And I think if we can seed them with some consistent speed that they showed throughout practice, man, we'll see what happens. But I think you want him potentially in some tournament lineups.
All right, shifting to the last two main Toyota drivers, 2311, Kurt Busch. He's starting 27th. 7,900, not the starting position that he would obviously like. I don't even really recall. I think they just didn't have a very good setup. I don't think he had any issues in his qualifying run. In practice, he looked okay. So, but starting 27th, that's massive PD upside for someone who's been pretty strong all year. Not his best track, but it's a decent track for him. I'm going to give Kurt Busch a 9.
Yeah, I gave him a 9 as well, and I think you look at the data, and he has 0 top 10s in the 7 races that we have as our sample this week, and you might be surprised. I don't want to play him because of that, but with what we're looking at in his setup with this new car, and then also he's almost 6x if he hits sitting there in 12th position. So he doesn't even need to be in the top 10 to really hit a strong value point. So I do like him a lot this week.
Yeah, and he's kind of sandwiched around some other interesting plays. I'm sure he'll still be highly owned because people will be looking for that PD upside, but just by the chance that they're not, maybe people decide, hey, Toyota's kind of struggled overall. Yeah, I mean, that's a guy who legit has top 10 upside that we've seen so far this year. Things get a little crazy at this end of the race. He keeps it clean. He may not have a 5th or 6th place car, but just because he's put himself in position, because he's just a veteran like that, he might get you, from a 12th to a 6th place finish. And that's huge when you talk about DraftKings points. I mean, that's a ton of points difference there. But like you said, even a 12th place still gives you almost 6x. So I like that play a lot. His teammate, Bubba Wallace, starting just like basically right behind him, 29th, $5,900. I don't remember the last time I saw Bubba below 6K. I mean, he's sometimes in the 6 or 7K, but 5,900 shows you even DraftKings recognizes he's been struggling this year. I'm going to give him a 7, and I think that's a fair score because he has a chance to, again, top 15. That for that price tag, that's massive value. But there's some guys around him that I like even more. So it's kind of hard for me to give him that 8, 9, 10 rating just because we haven't seen the consistency this year.
Yeah, I agree. I gave him a 7.5. He has some upside, but with him being even reaching the top 20 is going to be, I think, a stretch, and he's had some struggles here in the past. So I don't know if we get a lot of upside with him. So I want to have him in some tournament builds, but not in my cash games.
All right. Let's pivot from Toyota and let's talk about some other drivers because you're not going to be building 100% Toyota lineups, obviously. You're going to need some other good plays. Again, we have our full list of impact scores in the race guide. The link is down below. There's just too many good plays to really be able to go into everybody, but a few guys that we do want to talk about, we're just going to start at the top of the list because I think both of these guys are in really good positions to make some points, but they're also semi-expensive, and they're both Hendrick Motorsports drivers. Chase Elliott, 10,500, starting 15th. Pretty good track for him. I think he's got legit top 10 upside. With that price tag, you need him to do a little bit more. You need him to lead some laps, which worries me a little bit. But if people are kind of looking at the stats and trying to be smart about this, maybe you get Chase Elliott lower owned, and he ends up popping off, around a top 5 and leading some laps. I think Chase Elliott's a good, solid play. Not my favorite play, but He's going to get a 9 from me this week.
I've given him an 8, and also the second guy you're about to talk about, Kyle Larson, I gave him an 8 as well. I see these guys as very similar plays because their price tags, they're the two most expensive drivers on the slate. Kyle Larson has a little bit more upside in my opinion because $300 discount, but he's got some place differential. And if I'm going to go back and look at these two guys, I really want to have a little bit more Larson because that place differential difference. If I'm going to spend up, I want to get as much value as I can. The upside there, and I see he has the most out of those two guys in my opinion. They're the same though. I think there's so much value on this slate lower down that you can really build a lot of lineups with some dominators. Place differential is going to be key, but you can find the value I think a little bit else or lower where these guys are going to have more difficult time leading laps and really establishing themselves as dominators. So I don't want to have a lot of exposure to the two Hendrick guys up at the top. I might favor one of their teammates a little bit later. We'll get to him in a bit.
Yeah, I'm at a 8.5 on Larson. It's really tough because obviously Larson's already got a win this year, and he's had a couple races where he's looked good. But I really expected a lot more out of him last week at COTA. And I just never really saw much that made – and even Chase, although Chase was able to manage a fourth-place finish, he was obviously not the road course Chase that we're used to seeing. It was not his day at all. But he still got that fourth-place finish. Larson, it seems to be – I don't want to say he's struggling because a guy with a win already this year is kind of, you don't want to say they're struggling, but man, he doesn't. You take that win away, and then to me, when you just kind of look at some of the consistency this year, I think Chase Elliott's run better than Larson overall, minus the win. And I think when you look at track history, although we've already seen that track history doesn't necessarily mean anything with this new car. It's like everything's sort of reset. We'll kind of explain that when we get to Blaney later. I 100% agree with the place differential argument with Larson. Obviously, we know what Larson is capable of doing. But I got to say, I think Chase Elliott is in a spot where if Hendrick hits, makes some right adjustments, he might be that guy that does still give you a nice, solid finish. And maybe he's a little lower owned, but it's a tough call. They're almost the same. I do agree with you in that regard. But let's shift gears to the pole sitter. Probably the best driver this season. Just not counting wins, just overall, just raw performance. He's been Mr. Consistent. And, dude, this has been one of his worst tracks, and he got the pole. Ryan Blaney, 9,400. I'm at a 9. I think the scariest thing is if he's not fast enough early and doesn't get those laps led and drifts back, well, then you're kind of a sitting duck. You need him to lead laps to pay off that price tag. But there's a lot to like, in my opinion, about Blaney this week.
Yeah, I gave him an 8.5 because of what you just pointed out. If he doesn't get a lot of laps led early or a lot of laps led, period, there's fast guys, Kyle Busch, other guys that are right there ready to lead those laps that have shown the consistency at this track over their careers. He hasn't. You pointed it out. He struggled here over his career, not one of his best tracks, but this is a new car. He's been the model of consistency in this car, so we'll see how the which data pool is correct here, and if it's the new car or the track experience that wins out here. But I do like having him in a lot of tournament plays. I think he can be somebody that you can feel confident in this week.
Well, and Penske just overall is really good here. Statistically, this is one of, even Logano on the broadcast today said that Richmond is statistically one of his best tracks. Brad Keselowski, he's had some really good runs here when he was in that 2 Penske. So this is a good track for Penske as well. And just again, Blaney just has seemed to struggle here, but he did not struggle in practice or qualifying. Looked like he had short run speed, medium speed, and long run speed, which is dangerous if they hit that on Sunday. Will be different track conditions, though. They were practicing and qualifying early this morning. I think the temps were upper 40s, low 50s. They're going to be racing in the afternoon, obviously, on Sunday. we'll see how that affects these cars. But if Ryan Blaney is not been the best driver this year, this guy, Ross Chastain, has been the best. 8,900, he's starting 8th. Obviously just came off of a win. I think he had back-to-back second-place finishes, third place before that. I mean, the dude has been knocking on the door for the last few weeks. Finally gets it done. A little bit of controversy, but that's to be expected with Chastain. I like him a lot, man. To come out, start, and qualify 8th at a place that I didn't really know what we were going to get out of Trackhouse. I'm going to 8.5 on Chastain. I'm going to keep riding this train until they prove to me otherwise they're not good anymore or something.
Yeah, I've given him an 8.5 as well. I think we talked about some of him and some of these younger guys throughout our early episodes this season. This new car was going to be something that they would potentially take advantage of, and they sure have, and nobody's done it better than Ross Chastain with his win last week. It's awesome. I love seeing these younger guys have success because they're so talented, they're so driven, and now they're actually able to put wins on the table. I think there's a couple guys this week that are in the same conversation, that are in the same value range. So Ross Chastain, though, he's the next kid on the block that I think you can obviously build a whole new team around. You're developing Trackhouse with him and Suarez. Suarez has got even nice track history here. So I'm really excited about what Trackhouse is doing. 8.5 is what I've got Chastain this week because I really do think, until I see something differently, he's one of the top 5 drivers in the sport right now.
All right. Only a couple more drivers that we're going to talk about left. I would imagine this guy's got to be one of the highest owned drivers in the slate, and if he's not, I don't know what people are thinking considering he does have a win here. Alex Bowman, 8,500. I'd say looked decent in practice, but for some reason, starting 28th. So you're getting a guy who finished second last week, already has a win this year. We know kind of Bowman's tendencies, kind of, he surprised you out of nowhere, and then when you need him to do something, he kind of lets you down. I just don't know if we see that this week. I think even with that starting position, I think he's going to move up a lot of places, and he even could be in play if he keeps it clean throughout this race. Bowman's going to be one of my favorite plays on the slate. I got him at a 9.5.
I have him at a 9.5 too, and I think he's going to be chalk. I think he's going to be where everybody wants to be for place differential because he does, like you said, have a win here. I think a lot of people will go to him because it's easy. So you can use him, but expect him to be highly owned.
Yeah. The next guy, another one of my favorite plays. It's going to be this guy right here, Tyler Reddick, 8,200, starting 16th. I'm at a 9.5, man. The guy's been fast week in, week out. He's kind of been mirroring Ross Chastain a little bit. He's been up there, not quite getting it done. I don't know if this is really going to be the track where he can finally punch through and get that first victory, but why not? I mean, why not? With what we've seen already this year, drivers getting wins at tracks we didn't expect. Chase Briscoe at Phoenix. I mean, why couldn't Reddick and that RCR team do it? A little off the pace, I'd say, in practice and obviously qualifying. The dude's a racer. So even if he doesn't get that win, I think he's high top 10, right around that top 5 finish. So 9.5 for me all day.
9.5 for me as well. I think he's probably my favorite play of this whole entire slate because he has that right mix of track position, place differential, and price. So I really like where he is at this week. I think it will lead to him being highly owned, but he's somebody that can be a dominator if he's up there, does a little bit. If we do get a competition caution, he could go make a quick change, be right up there again. I think there's going to be a lot of upside with him this week.
You brought up the comp caution, and at the time of recording this, we don't know if they will throw one or not. I really don't know if they will. I kind of hope they do because the next guy on the slate, I think it's potentially make or break if they throw a comp caution. If you know they're throwing a comp caution, I'm going to be all over Justin Haley, 6,300, starting 36th. I know that car's better than that. The only reason why he qualified there is they failed inspection 3 times. They wouldn't allowed to do a qualifying position. He'd have to start in the back anyway. But here's the kicker. Because they failed 3 times, they will have to start at the rear of the field. Well, not the rear of the field, but they will have to do a pass-through penalty, which at Richmond will put you a lap down, could potentially put you 2 laps down. If they get that comp caution and he's the lucky dog, cool. We're back in, game on. But, man, if they don't do that, that makes it really, really tough. I'm at an 8.5 right now, but believe me, if it gets announced as a comp caution, that's like a 9.5 for me.
Yeah, I've given him a 7.5 because I think he is going to be one of those guys that is the difference in tournaments. I think he's going to be really fun to have a little bit of money on, but I think it's risky. So I want to find some other guys that might have value, and I think the epitome of that is Ty Dillon. I think he's somebody we've talked about often, really consistent. This year's no different. $5,200 starting 30th. His teammate Eric Jones has a top 5 car starting out. That's a lot of upside there, knowing that his teammate has that. But he's been really good at this track. He's been pretty consistent throughout this season. I've got him with an 8.
Yeah, I don't see Ty Dillon getting necessarily a top 10, but at 5,200, you don't need him to. I mean, if the dude hits a 20th place finish, which is around where I would on any given day kind of put Ty Dillon and that team at roughly being at stacked with the field, that's going to be over 6x. And then if it gets a little crazy at the end, there's a chance that he can move up a few more spots. And then even if he doesn't, he's only 5,200. So if you plan on playing, a Kyle Busch, Martin Truex stack, and then maybe even want to go with one of the 2 Hendrick drivers just because of their upside there or whatnot, like he opens the door for that. So as far as punt plays, I don't know if that's quite a punt play, but it's as close to punt play as we'll touch on today. I like him a lot. 8.5 from me.
Yeah, I'm excited to get this a little bit further down the road. This is going to be a fun slate to kind of put together. DraftKings has got a little bit of easy pricing. I think this week's really opens the door to a lot of plays.
Well, yeah, I think it's just because even they don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, this year has just been so unlike the previous 4, 5, 6 years that I can really think of. Is just like 6 races, 6 different winners. I really would not be surprised if we have more than 16 winners and then we have to start going to some points again and a guy with a win doesn't make the playoffs. That's what makes me a little bit worried about Hamlin. If he doesn't punch it in this year, he just may not even be able to get in because there's so many winners. We'll see if that trend continues because, I mean, there's been no repeat winners yet. I don't even know if we're going to get one this week because I really like Kyle Busch and Truex potentially getting their win here. Logano, he's right there too. I mean, there's so many. There's a lot of good drivers who don't have a win yet, and I think they could keep that trend going. So I'm really looking forward to this race, which is surprising because Richmond the last few years has not been the most entertaining races. But I think this one's going to be really good. We already saw a pretty good race with the Xfinity, and those guys they didn't even have any wrecks, and it was still a pretty solid race. So these Cup guys can do something similar. I think we're going to be in for a good show on Sunday.
Speaking of winners, who do you got?
Oh, man. That's really tough. Oh, I'm gonna take the chalk. I'm gonna go Truex.
I'm going Kyle Busch. I really do think Toyota has to step up. This is their race.
He's not the candy man this week. He's the cookie man.
He's the cookie man, so we'll see if he gets the job done, but it's KFB.
But will he be the cookie monster?
We'll find out.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Anything else that you wanted to say before we close out?
Man, I think we covered a lot. I'm really excited. I really do look forward to this week's race. This new car has really brought a new level of excitement, and these youngsters, and pretty much like we've talked about, I think NASCAR really has done a good job of bringing the parity every week. Anybody can win this race. Anybody, any age, any experience level right now is in contention, and I think it's really leaning to the guys that can be a little bit more aggressive, and I think Kyle Busch is going to find a way to get the job done this week.
And one more thing before we close out, we didn't talk about Prize Picks because we don't currently have that information at recording, But if you are here for some Prize Picks info, we will have that in our Garage Thoughts. You can find that link down below. I would imagine there's going to be some good plays because there's a lot of stuff on here that, I mean, already we've seen just with this new scoring that Prize Picks has switched to this year. We've found some nice little gems, I think. I think we'll see some more once we get it uploaded. But if you are not currently a Prize Picks member and are wanting to try it out, well, use promo code GARAGE, and we will match 100% of your deposit up to $100 on that first time that you sign up, as long as you use the promo code GARAGE.
Yeah, and I do like Prize Picks this year because of all the uncertainty. You don't have to have 6 drivers to build a core lineup. You can do it with 2 or 3 if you really find some value you like based on the initial numbers that we have. Like you said, we put them in our Garage Thoughts, so if you want to go check that out and where we are with our projections and see if we've got a little bit of a difference there, minus or negative, of where the fantasy points land there, I think this is where you can find some additional value to grow your bankroll.
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, let's send these guys out. Without any further ado, I am Jeremy. That is Joe, and this has been the Race Day Rundown. Take care.